Hello, I'm Stacy Smith, and welcome to another edition of Around the Table, Politics 2020. This is where we discuss politics and a few other items that might come up on our agenda. Joining us today is our former Republican governor of Pennsylvania, Tom Corbett. Mr. Corbett also served as Attorney General for the state of Pennsylvania and was also U.S. Attorney for Pennsylvania in the Western District. Governor, welcome to another edition of Around the Table.
Good to see you again, Stacy.
Good to see you as well. On the other side of the table, we find the former chairman of the state Democratic Party, Jim Byrne. Jim also served on the Allegheny County Council and also was mayor of Millvale for quite a few years, and he is now an attorney here in Pittsburgh. Hi, Jim. Welcome again.
Good to be with you.
Not an attorney, but has his own consulting firm and well-versed in politics, is Keith Schmidt. Keith also served as the state director for former Pennsylvania Senator Rick Santorum and also served on Santorum's presidential campaign. Hi, Keith. How are you?
Happy to be here, Stacy.
Very good to have you. Also staying on the Republican side of the table, we find Chris Fry. Chris is the mayor of Newcastle and is learning firsthand just how you try to hold politics on one hand and serving the people on the other and make the two meld. Mayor, welcome.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, now we turn to our great philosopher around the table, Joe Misty. Joe is well-versed in politics as well. On the Democratic side, he is known behind the camera, in front of the camera, behind the scenes, in front of the scenes. He's been a consultant for many political candidates in this area, and he teaches law at Duquesne University, as does the governor. Joe, welcome.
Stacy, it's good to be with everybody.
That's good to have you. Let's delve right into this. The first thing I want to talk about is the president and how things are going for him or perhaps not going well for him. This, as our viewers are going to see, is the latest poll numbers from Real Clear Politics. The average of these polls show that Joe Biden is leading Mr. Trump by 10 points, 50.6 points to 40.6 of those polled. This is, again, a national average of polls. Also, when you break it down to the state of Pennsylvania, Mr. Biden has a 49.3 to 43 lead over the president, a 6.3 lead. I know all of you want to say that this is, something that happens. It's a snapshot in time. A lot of things can change. But as it stands right now, it's not going higher for the president. In fact, it is going lower. So I want to direct the first question about all of this to Keith Schmidt. Keith, we also saw a very disappointing turnout for the president in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He rebounded some in Arizona, but it was a much smaller venue that was packed there. Your thoughts on the way things are going right now?
Well, Stacy, I would be remiss if I didn't say there was probably some concerns in the Trump camp. But like you said, I don't think there's any panicking going on June 25th. With 131 days remaining and a news cycle that seems to change from morning to afternoon, I'm not sure that there's a panic button being hit right now. But the numbers are concerning. What's going for the president is that this is a man who had never led a poll in 2016. And I think that a lot of people are maybe disingenuous when they're speaking to pollsters. So I would suggest that maybe those polls are even already a little tighter. I also think Mr. Trump benefits from the fact that both in 2016 and now in 2020, there is a choice to be made. And in both times, I think he finds himself facing off against Democrats who are not at the best of their game. In 2016, I would suggest that Hillary Clinton was not the candidate she was in 2008. And now in 2020, it's a formidable opponent in Joe Biden. He's been around for 50 years. But quite frankly, I think 10, 20, or 30 years ago, he was a much stronger candidate. And now Mr. Biden, who is hugging his 78th birthday, I think is much diminished compared to the Joe that I knew 20 years ago. So I think there are a lot of things going for him that I think it's a little bit premature to say that they're worried that much right now.
Keith, we were all stronger candidates 30 years ago.
Amen.
Right.
Amen.
The polls are what they are right now. But one thing that we have also said is that Trump will be judged by where we are with COVID, with 1 to 2 weeks left in October. And as of right now, it's not getting better. If anything, it's getting worse. We're starting to see numbers get back to levels that they were in April or May, and in some cases, even worse than they were in April or May. And he's going to have to wear that. And his rhetoric has not been helpful. The numbers, like Stacy indicated, for him continue to go down, and that's because of how he has erratically handled the COVID crisis and how he has erratically handled the issues surrounding police reform. So he hasn't done himself any favors by the way he has rolled out his approach, or lack thereof, to these two frontline issues. And there are some similarities with 2016, but there are also some differences. Hillary Clinton lost that race. Donald Trump didn't win it. She imploded. She was not the best candidate the Democrats could have put forward. And all the vulnerabilities that many in the party had about her being pushed out into the front came to fruition that fall. Areas like Western Pennsylvania, the Rust Belt states, Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan. She was not a good candidate, and she seldom if ever went there and did the retail she needed to do. Many Democrats, moderate Democrats and others, went to Trump, an unknown, but better than what they knew they thought was a flawed candidate. That variable doesn't exist now. Joe Biden may be, as Keith said, 30 years or 20 years, or not the candidate he used to be, but like the professor said, who is. However, he is a steady hand. He is familiar. He's somebody that they know, and they think in uncertain, chaotic times, a little stability in the White House would be a welcome thing. So that's why he's showing a lead in those electoral states.
Here's my thought on this is, number one, Stacy, you're absolutely right. This is a snapshot in time. But if we didn't have these polls and these snapshots, what would all the pundits have to say? They're absolutely a necessary evil. They don't count until we get very close, maybe to the last week. And I am surprised that the president is as close in Pennsylvania as you just indicated. I would have thought from the discussions that you hear out there, and Jim, I think you probably agree, that it would have been closer to the national average than it is. And what's key to remember is Trump did not win the plurality of the vote. He won the Electoral College. And one of the things he has to do is win states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Ohio. He's going to win some of his states. It's going to be very close. And he is going to be judged on what he has done. He's now the incumbent. Normally, the incumbent has the edge or the advantage. I don't think he does in this way, because he really hasn't acted like an incumbent throughout the entire time that he has been president. And he continues to say things that you see coming right back in a commercial against him. For instance, like, let's slow down the testing. That made no sense. And we're going to see that from now until Election Day. So in this case, I think it's not really his to lose because he's not winning at the moment, but it's also not Biden's to win because he could be losing at the moment. I'm going to key in on this. We know who the vice presidential candidate is for the Republicans. We don't know who it is for the Democrats. And voters this time may be looking more closely at who the vice president is to see who's going to succeed him than just looking at who the president is.
We've all been around, and we all will find it hard to break with the conventional wisdom that this is really early, that anything can still happen in this race. But there's a phrase called jumping the shark, and it comes from Happy Days. And the Fonz actually jumped the shark while he was water skiing. But critics pointed to that as the very moment when Happy Days began its decline in popularity. And it wasn't long after that. It still had a bit of a run. But in relative terms, it wasn't long after that before it was the end of the series. The question is, did Trump jump the shark in Tulsa with a 19,000 seat stadium? 6,200 people showed up after he bragged that he had 1 million people who wanted to get in. Did he jump the shark? And when he walked away from that helicopter, when he arrived back in Washington, D.C., I've seen guys leaving bar fights who look better than he looked. He had a crumpled MAGA hat in his hand. He just looked like a beaten man. The question is, was that a moment when things began to turn? And we'll see in time.
He's jumped. he's put that Fonzie leather jacket on, and he's jumped so many great whites in the last 3.5 years. And I keep saying he's jumped the shark. He's jumped the shark. Is this the moment? Is this the moment? And he finds a way to fight back.
Right.
But
right.
that was a significant day. Absolutely. And how many more sharks will he jump from now until then? But it's a great analogy. He had a bad rollout. You could point to 1,000,001 reasons why that was a flop. People are losing enthusiasm for him. People are getting tired of the P.T. Barnum show that he puts on. People didn't want to get sick. Any reason the kids crashed the ticket requests, whatever you want to point to, any one of them is a viable reason. But he certainly put his foot in his mouth by saying it was going to be this grand event, and it was anything but.
Mayor, I'm going to bring you in on this if you possibly can. Mayor, we've talked about how the president was elected not by a popular vote, but by the electoral vote. And one of the key areas that helped the president win Pennsylvania was Western Pennsylvania. You're in Newcastle. What are the feelings right now about the president that you see and feel in your area?
And that's what I was going to say. You know, I've been the underdog before, and I think it is a little too early for us to start, putting all of our faith and decisions in the polls. I look at it on the ground level, local government, and what we're doing as what the president and what the administration currently is doing for local government, even though the funding hasn't been supportive for the COVID. But in terms of how we're communicating on some of the other regards as racial disparities and then also unemployment and job loss, and we're starting to work those phases back in. I think there's support from the Trump administration now that I'm seeing on the ground. And as a leader in my community, obviously, it's tough. I'm not going to go out and direct people to vote one way or the other. Obviously, keep it open for the voters to make that choice. But I have to advocate for the fact that on the ground and going through the COVID and seeing what the legislation is coming forward. Again, we talked about the Justice Act on the last call. I see those things as positives for on the ground grassroots, things. And I think there's still a large majority of people that are out there, or a large group of people that are out there that are silent during these times, that aren't coming forward and putting their, clicking their polls or putting forth their ideas and their information for who they think should be president or not. And I think they're keeping it open because a lot of this stuff is so fresh and so new, and it's hard to judge. And we want to see how leadership, we want to see how President Trump leads during these times, and we also want to see what ideas the Democratic Party and Biden comes forth to manage and lead us through these tough times. So I come from that end. I was an underdog all the way through my campaign, but again, there were out of nowhere shot out a group of people and that believed in the vision and the work that I was going to bring forth.
Are you saying, Mayor, that do you think that the president right now is the underdog in the polls, in the races, not the polls, but in the races?
In the polls, I'm not. In the race, I'm not hearing it from where I'm at. I don't see it here.
Okay, so you feel there's still strong support for the president?
I think there's still strong support in Western PA for the president.
I think there is, Stacy. The 79 corridor. You get out of Allegheny County, take 79, just right up into Butler, or go up into Beaver, or go up to Lawrence, go up to Mercer, go all the way up to Crawford to Erie, everywhere in between. You'll see Trump signs, you'll see a lot of MAGA. I mean, you will, and you did 4 years ago. But remember that Pennsylvania was flipped red for the first time in 30 years. Wasn't on my watch, but first time in 30 years, it flipped red by a sliver. And that sliver can be found in the 79 corridor. In the demographic where it can be found, I would suggest, is middle-aged white male voters that weren't comfortable with Hillary Clinton for whatever reason. And they do not belong in Donald Trump's column anymore out here, not by the margins he would need. So I think the battleground to keep Pennsylvania red or flip it back to blue is going to be, the battle line is the 79 corridor. You're going to see a lot of attention by the Trump folks and the Biden folks out here, because that's where Hillary in the Democratic National Committee lost Pennsylvania. So it's still strong for Trump, but I don't think by the margins he needs to keep Pennsylvania red.
For me, Stace, I really think there are growing parallels to 1968 and the tumultuous year we faced in politics and in this country in 1968. There is a lot of unrest. There is a lot of divisions. I think the stark differences between the Democrat and Republican Party seems to be growing hourly. I think the liberals are hunkering down and the conservatives are hunkering down. I really believe, quite frankly, as I read an article this morning about them negotiating about 3 or 4 presidential debates in September or October, I always question how important they are. For some reason, I believe that there is going to be record audiences watching those debates in the end of this campaign, because so much has changed in our lives, in the world, in America in the last 4 or 5 months, and they will continue to change in the next 3. And they're going to want to hear both these gentlemen's visions for the next 4 years. And I have a feeling that could be a do or die moment for both the Democratic nominee and the incumbent president.
And that's what I can definitely agree with that. I think now it's too early, and I just don't think people are seeing, or hearing what they want to hear right now. And those debates and some of the events that are going to be coming are definitely going to move the needle one way or the other.
I would like to ask this question to Joe. Have we ever had a debate between 2 presidential candidates that both are in their 70s?
Yeah, I don't think we have. Now, there's, of course, that famous Ronald Reagan line with Walter Mondale. He said that he didn't want the race to be about age. He was not going to hold Mondale's youth and inexperience against him because Reagan had been criticized for being older. I think this race is going to turn on some different issues for a change. And, we can debate all the big political issues of the times, but this race may very well turn on things like kindness and compassion and notions of social justice. There may be a fatigue out there with the chaos that we wake up to every morning, and people may be looking for a break from that. And that would mean that this race will not be keyed in on the typical issues that we've looked at in the past, we've weighed in the past. These are just different times.
I suspect.
Go ahead, Jim.
I suspect that Mr. Trump will put the Fonz jacket on between now and the first debate and jump a few more sharks. I do continue to think he's going to implode, but I would suspect that at one of these debates, he's going to do it in an historic fashion. When was the last time any of us have seen him stay on point at a press conference? When was the last time, if ever, any of us have seen him answer a direct question from a reporter? He can get away with dodging the question or using polemic instead of analysis or making an inappropriate remark to a reporter. He can get away with that when he's standing up there with that presidential seal at the podium. He will not be able to get away with that when reporters and questioners at debates ask him specific questions, give him time limits, and expect answers. I suspect he's probably going to say
let me turn the table on. Let me turn the table on you here, Jim. Are you that confident in how the former vice president will handle himself?
Absolutely.
No, I didn't say that I was. But I think, if Mr. Biden could just as easily not respond to a question, and then he gets criticized for these gaffes, I understand that. But if you had to choose which of those 2 types of, if I'm a staffer for either one of these 2, and I had to pick your poison. Do you want your candidate at a debate to flub the question or say something irrelevant or sound like he's away or not focused? Or would you rather have the candidate who is offensive and degrading and insulting? I would choose the former. That would be Joe Biden.
All right, well, let me stay on the Democratic side here for just a moment. I think most of us have been to 1 or 2 national conventions in our life. The Democrats have chosen now to do a virtual convention, and there will not be that sense of togetherness that you want to generate from a party. Most of the time, these conventions start to generate enthusiasm going into the fall. And as a reporter, I know from covering many conventions, that you get a sense there of just how enthusiastic a party happens to be for its presidential nominee. And you can tell when they're really charged and when it's kind of but they're underneath it, they're really not that excited about their candidate. Without having a national convention, is this going to hurt the Democrats as far as enthusiasm goes going into the fall?
I think I would suggest that the pageantry and everything that comes with a live national convention is going to be there's going to be a loss of that. And I think what's going to be affected is I think the audience for it nationally will go down dramatically. That said, I'm not sure that it isn't the best way to protect the lead. The packaging of the vice president, I think, is very important. And you can really package them in a virtual convention. So to that end, I would prefer almost that if there, obviously we would all prefer there wasn't a pandemic, but if there was an open convention, I think sometimes the vice president is vulnerable. Here, I think they'll be able to package them, but I don't think the excitement's going to be there, and I don't think enough people are going to watch it to make a real difference.
You know, his basement strategy has worked pretty well for him so far.
He's up 10 points.
Yeah, that's right, and this is just an extension of that. You know, we've all had candidates when we've suggested they just go to Florida until the election was over. You know, both of these candidates could probably do that and have a better chance of boosting their numbers when it comes to those kinds of issues. I think the responsible party and the responsible candidate carries the day here. And I think that Americans know that it's irresponsible to pack people into a tight space, spreading this disease without any precautions taken for the people standing next to you, to your fellow citizens. So I think a virtual convention is actually a plus. I think it sends the right message this year.
The Democrats are the party of public safety. The Democrats care about getting COVID under control. The Democrats are thinking about the safety of others versus the spin we can put on Mr. Trump for forcing everybody into an arena, that it's about maintaining and acquiring power at the expense of public safety. And that would be the distinction that we could be able to make, and I think we could make it successfully is if it plays out that way.
Historically, I would disagree with you with your statement that the Democrats are viewed as the party of public safety. Historically, I think it's been the Republicans that have been viewed that way. Now, in this instance, that might be the case. I'm not going to concede that at this point in time. But it is an issue, and it's an issue that not only does it affect what's going to happen with conventions, and maybe for forever, but also what's going to happen when we get to the election in November, and the lines that are going to be there, and how we're going to vote, and the counting of the vote. And I don't know if we have enough time to get into that today, Stacy. Maybe we save that for next time.
No, it's one of the topics I did want to bring up, and that is that things are changing. We are now looking at a situation where you may not know who the winner of the election is until several days afterwards, after all the mail-in ballots are counted. And each state seems to have a different way they're going to decide that as to when that ballot has to be postmarked by, and then how much time you have before it is delivered to the election central area for each state, and then how much time they have to count that vote. Are we as Americans ready for this delay, do you guys think?
You know,
Well,
it took us 30 days to get the returns with Bush Gore.
Well, with the exception of 2000. Okay, I'll give you that.
And also, you know, I think probably all of us remember a time when, or at least most of us remember a time when you would have to wait sometimes for days or a week or two to get the returns to find out who'd won the close races. I think it's better to get it right than to get it fast. It's the same problem that the press has fallen into. You know, this rush to be the first ones out of the gate to report things before the other guys usually means you make mistakes that you otherwise would not make.
That doesn't
I think the average American, Stacy, have a problem in 2020 in the world that we live in and how technical and how advanced we are, that we're facing really regressing as far as our vote count is concerned. I understand the reasons why. I'm saying the average American, I think, is going to have a real concern about the integrity of the vote when they see days pass until a final winner is declared. And you're absolutely right. I think that's going to happen. And I said a month or two ago, we better start preparing the average American that this is going to happen. If it's a close race, don't be alarmed and don't sound the alarm bell. It will take several days because of how we have chosen to go through mail-in ballots that have to be hand counted. And if we don't prepare them, there could be real civil unrest, and that wouldn't be good for anybody.
Right. And how do you ensure the integrity? That's what, you look at in the integrity of police force, integrity of teachers, integrity. Now you look at how do you ensure the integrity of the voting? What are they going to put body cameras on the counters? People want to see and feel that. And it's a task that I don't know that can be honored, but I agree with you, Keith. It's going to be something that people are going to, it feels like we're kind of regressing and we need to be pushing forward in our times. But I also agree with that. We need to do it diligently, and it needs to happen.
I'm a paper ballot guy myself. I think the paper ballots are tried and true. The problem is that they take a long time. Now, what we have in Allegheny County, we've seen that it can be done right. We just did it. Rich Fitzgerald and the Allegheny County Election Department did a superb job in this last election because they invested the money and the time and the training and preparation into the electoral process, as we always have, as we have traditionally done in Allegheny County. So it can be done right, but we have a hybrid where you mark
Allegheny
the paper
County,
ballot
Allegheny,
and then it gets skewed.
Allegheny County set a gold standard, Professor, for how to do it in this situation.
Absolutely.
I mean, they really did. They
Yep.
should, the administration in Allegheny County and the Board of Elections, which is Rich, Sam DeMarco, and Bethany Hallam, they supervise the whole thing, but somebody, the chief executive, should go around the rest of the state and show every other
That's right.
county.
It takes a level of commitment that doesn't
work.
exist in other places yet.
Yes,
I agree.
they are the gold standard.
This is going to be an issue across the state and across the nation. If I was in my old seat, I would be pulling the members of the legislature and leadership of the legislature, including the new speaker that we have, in together this month and say, what do we need to do from the executive and from the legislative standpoint to ensure that we have a smooth election coming up in November and as quick as possible results published. There's no reason to sit back and just say, well, every county is going to go and do it their own way. I understand that. But all those numbers come to Harrisburg, and they all have to be then certified. I think it's time for them to step up, bring in the county commissioners and say, how are we going to do this?
Yes.
There's time. It's not that soon. There's time to go ahead and do something like that right now. Because I guarantee you, this election, I don't care what the results are, the other side is going to be complaining that loses and saying it was rigged. And it's going to be similar to, 1968 and 2000 and 2000. It's going to be bitter, and we need to be prepared for that.
Absolutely.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this morning for Around the Table. We had a great conversation, and we'll look forward to doing it again next week. Thanks.
Can I say one thing? Please
Yes.
send a memo to me telling me never to wear green again. My head looks like it's floating with this background.
I was going to call you and tell you.
I think you look great, Keith.
All right. Thanks, guys. Talk to you later.
Take care,
Thank you.
Stacy.